Okay, guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of How I Built This, Birmingham style. Of course, I'm Ron, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop and Pink Zebra Moving. I'm also the host here, and I love what I do. I get to talk to entrepreneurs all over Birmingham all the time. I get to hear their stories. I get to be inspired, even educated, and learn from their experiences. And on top of all that, I get to steal a few ideas every now and then and use them in my own businesses. And today we have someone that I cannot wait to hear their story. It's really going to be something I think you guys are excited about. Cindy Martin is the founder of Bham Now. Prior to starting Bham Now, she was the CEO of Alabama Media Group, which a lot of people don't know this, but they own all sorts of newspapers across the country. And of course, being the big one, AL.com. She was at AL.com when it was founded. And so I can't wait to hear the story of those early days with Alabama Media Group, and also can't wait to hear what Cindy's doing at Bham Now today. So Cindy, welcome to How I Built This.
Well, thank you, Ron. It is a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to it.
Absolutely. So you're a Birmingham girl. You grew up in Alabama.
I sure did. I actually grew up in Bessemer when it was a sweet suburban town with steel families that had settled there. And that's how we landed there. My dad worked at U.S. Steel and eventually migrated down to the University of Alabama, where both of my parents worked there. And that's where I chose to go to college. Roll Tide.
There you go. Believe it or not, I love me some Birmingham, but I went to University of Georgia, ironically. So, and my wife's Auburn, so there's that. But I could take the Roll Tide. So you're at Alabama, you know all about Birmingham. I remember hearing a story actually about some of your college days. It actually related to some of my own college days because you had an entrepreneurial drive even back in those early days, right?
I sure did. So I majored in mechanical engineering and I got an MBA, stayed on campus for that. But when I was in engineering school, I was on a very small team that was chosen to start a business on campus. And we had a blast with it. We called it Hangovers Video Services, still media. So some things just don't change. Our business model was to go out and take video of the Greek systems parties, sororities and fraternities and their crazy parties, and then to sell the video back to them. And guess what? That was a failure. We suddenly found out they didn't want to be on camera and didn't want these parties recorded. So that was my first failure right there, but I still have a t-shirt for the effort.
I like it. I bet there were some interesting memories that you have from those days, watching those parties go down. Well, we all have a little entrepreneur in us, even when we're at that age. We probably don't necessarily call it that. You probably didn't call it entrepreneurism, but there's always this sort of hustler mentality inside of us that we eventually use in a professional manner later on as we grow into adulthood. And so kind of take us, how you left this really highly technical field of mechanical engineering to digital media and journalism. When did that transformation start to occur?
That is a great question. And I get that question a lot. So in the MBA school, I really found a lot of passion for marketing and for the entrepreneurism. And I, computers were kind of just coming on the scene. I went to school in the 80s at Alabama. And so, the technology for digitizing was still in its infancy. Fortunately, after graduate school, I had an offer to start with AT&T and be part of they had a corporate rotation program that would expose you to all kinds of different situations and people and kind of throw you into the fire. It was called a high risk, high reward program. And you either got promoted fast or fired fast. And I was really attracted to that idea. I was like, I love a challenge. And I thought, hey, I'm going to work hard and I'm either going to make it or I'm not. So that was kind of my toe into the water into kind of a technology business. And I started out in leadership and was managing a group of data center technicians on midnight shift. Because you know what they do to the new kid on the block. And so I had a dozen 65-year-old guys who were very kind to me. They could have been mean looking in hindsight, but they were very sweet and very supportive. That was my first role, kind of getting familiar with giant computer systems. And I was transferred to New Jersey, corporate headquarters for AT&T. And you might remember, where you're younger than I am, but you might remember AT&T was the giant, back in the 80s, and it went through divestiture, and it was kind of going through some major changes. However, for me, it offered a great opportunity to get exposed. And I volunteered for things I wanted to get involved in. One of them was their email business. So AT&T had an email network that they used internally. And in those days, a lot of companies didn't even really use email. And I supervised a group of 100 or so technicians that were providing tech support for email. And I remember being awestruck by the power of communication over email, that you could write up something, hit one button, and suddenly 200 people get it. And it's powerful, as we all know, and we've all made some mistakes on it. But that was kind of like my first toe in the water with it.
That is so cool. So you were literally there in the infancy when email wasn't a thing, wasn't even a word, probably. It was probably called electronic messages.
I think it was. I think it was called electronic messaging. And there was a new division that opened up at corporate and AT&T, and it was to study the onset of digital services. And I raised my hand and said, I want on that team. Fortunately, I had the ability to be on that first launch team for AT&T's very first dial-up service, and it was called WorldNet. So WorldNet was a service that they sold to businesses, and really more business focused at the time than consumer. There was a lot of fear of eroding the telecom business. So, the dial-up service was kind of a B2B business. But we had the strategy of putting content behind a firewall. And as you might know, Ron, and one reason I love this business is it continues to evolve and it continues to change. And I've loved kind of riding all these cycles with it and seeing the evolution of the business. So that was a really fun time to get to launch WorldNet and to be on that business development team of negotiating contracts of content that would be behind this firewall for AT&T.
And you're in your 20s at this time, right? You're still... That's
right.
Yeah. Wow, that's a pretty high level position.
It was a lot of fun. And I, looking back, it really was a joy, because all of these services were new. There were services popping up: Genie, Delphi, AltaVista, AOL, all of these behind the firewall services that had content that you would have to join that network to get to the content. And so I subscribed to all of them. I had an account on like 10 of these services. And, it was right at the infancy, and it was really a blast.
What's interesting to me, and tell me, I could be wrong here, but what you're describing sounds very similar to what Alabama Media Group created, to have this sort of access to all of this other content through this one platform. Is that what you saw there in the two different companies? And is that what made you make the move eventually from AT&T to Alabama Media?
So that is a great question. In between time, I left AT&T and I moved to San Francisco to take a job with Magellan. And Magellan was one of the first 5 search engines on the internet. And we were, this was in 1995-ish. And search engines, this is pre-Google. So Yahoo was on the roster. There were just a very, very few. AltaVista hung on for a while, and Magellan. And we came very close to filing for public status and all moving away to an island. However, there was a bigger search engine, Excite, that bought us. So we were consumed by a bigger fish at the time. And I had a choice to make. That was, do I stay with Excite in California or do I do something else? I had a call from one of the largest media companies out of New York, Advance Publications. Advance owns a lot of newspapers across the country, and they had a concept of starting these digital businesses. And since they owned the Birmingham News, the Huntsville Times, and the Mobile Register, they were considering an online service that would accumulate a lot of that content and offer that up for consumers. So, I gave it some thought, and my parents were still here in Bessemer, Alabama. So it wasn't a real hard decision. I decided to move home and start AL.com, and worked out of my home for 6 months, attracting people to come to work. And we did have to look out of state for a lot of talent because this was in maybe 1997-ish. And digital talent was hard to find.
Sure.
So we did attract people, and I was fortunate to have started the business in Huntsville, which is a little more tech savvy than some parts of the rest of the state. Although Birmingham is changing and Birmingham is coming up as well.
So there's so much to unpack there. And it's for a nerd like myself who loves business, hearing all those names. How cool was it to be a part of so many of those startups and have the opportunities that probably seemed limitless, in terms of wealth creation and the things it could do for society, things that they did do for society even. Was there just like constant adrenaline pumping all the time being a part of all these startups?
They were very different. The startup in San Francisco had the aim to go public and to gain a lot of wealth. The startup with AL.com was very different because it was privately owned from this advanced company out of New York. So, you weren't going to get rich quick. So the goals were different, and my motivation for it was unique. Becoming part of the community was a real part of the job, and looking more long-term at the growth of the business and the opportunities, and working with our partners, the newspaper companies. So, I think personally, it was great to have those different experiences, and to be able to see the talent that it attracts, because it does attract different types of people with different goals.
So I don't know if this is the right word. Was it a little intimidating to come into a state, let's face it, like Alabama, who probably is not on the leading edge of, disruption and technology, and yet really want to be that change agent, someone who's going to come in and say, the old school newspapers, we're kind of dying, and we're going to change this into a new digital landscape. And I'm the person that's going to do that. My assumption is that there was a lot of old guard who were intimidated by you, and maybe even the other way around, because it was a little bit of a battleground. Did you experience any of that?
There certainly was some trepidation, I think, on both sides. And I have a lot of respect for the news business and for how these companies have continued to serve the communities, for many of them for over 100 years. I think that if we, the AL.com team, had not been the one to come in and really grow digital strong, it would have been someone else. So, our selling point to the leadership at the newspapers and the community is that this is going to happen. So let's make it happen together, and with the same leadership from the company in New York, then have a different company come in and scoop up those jobs. So I think most people understood that. And I think the change was really hard for a lot of people and hard on a lot of lives. So I don't take that lightly.
Well, I would be very proud of what you accomplished. You built something that had no history. No one knew what AL.com was 16 years ago when you first started this, and you've not just created a business around it that has created opportunities. You've created a noun. It's like AL.com is this one thing now. And I'm sure whenever you can probably remember the days you were sitting around the table thinking, what should the domain be? And it's now become this thing. So.
Well, you're absolutely right. It didn't have a name. And I remember working with a legal team out of New York on finding a name for it. And I think it was AL.com was used for email by some faraway country at some point. And it was when 2-letter domains actually still existed. So we were really fortunate to get that, because you're right. It's memorable. It's really easy. And
you think about it. Nobody says Google.com. Like when we say AL.com nowadays, it just sounds so normal. Like it's this thing, it's like this almost living thing. So you did a great job building that into a real brand. So congratulations. All right.
Well, and thank you, Ron. And we had a team of 60 on AL.com. So we had a lot of help, a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. The newspapers contributed, as you know. We republished their work through AL.com. So a lot of that credit goes to the folks at the newspapers too.
So what were those early days like? You said you worked out of your basement, I think you said, for the first several months. So you go from this, penthouse, I guess, in Jersey to this really cool oceanfront or bayfront San Francisco office to the basement in Birmingham. What were those early days like for you leading the charge?
Moving from San Francisco directly to Huntsville was a little bit of a shock. And I will say, some parts of it were kind of lonely because I didn't know a soul in Huntsville. And I kind of, like usual, I threw myself into the work and I got a lot of joy from that. So, it was a little bit of a change, and the pace was different. And the opportunities to go out and go to brunch or to see some art or, those things were all really different. So it was a big choice, and it was one that I, had to think through very carefully, because, I'm sure there would have been different opportunities had I stayed in San Francisco. But my parents were a huge draw for me, and I knew they wouldn't be around forever. And I don't regret 1 second of spending time with my parents.
Well, we're glad you're here. So I want to talk about those just first few years, like the hiring issues, maybe it grew so fast. Were there any fast growth issues? You managed everything. You were the eyes and ears for everything in the state of Alabama when it came to media. And it was all brand new. And so you were carving your path as you were doing all those things. So if you don't mind, I know it's kind of hard to unpack all that, but talk to us about what those experiences were and how they can be helpful to a potential, or aspiring entrepreneur here locally now.
Hiring is complicated, and I don't know that there's a perfect formula. One thing that I've learned is looking at what people have done and what successes they've had give you a lot of insight into what they'll do in the future. So, if you're hiring, and especially if you're moving someone into state, which we did, a lot of our first hires were transplants who had been in digital media or startups elsewhere. To your point, there wasn't much digital labor in Alabama at the time in the mid 1990s. So, being careful with hires, really spending time with them when you can, and talking, really following through with the references. And, what I have found with references is sometimes you have to ask hard questions because almost everybody wants to say good things about people because that's who we are.
Sure.
And so kind of pressing on the references and asking if there was one growth area, what would it be? So changing the conversation a little bit to be a lot more specific on the skill sets and where they need growth, because we all have areas that we need growth. So trying to find that out in the beginning is really important. And, there's another challenge too, when you're moving people from out of state, then they kind of experienced what I did, but probably double time because this is my home. And, I did have some friends and relatives in the Birmingham area. But if you're moving from Florida or Ohio to Alabama and you don't know a soul, then I think that there is an added challenge of making sure that that person gets situated into the community. And, I know one thing that what was on your mind too is what would I have done differently? And that's always a tough thing to answer because you think, you do the best you can with what you've got. I think looking back, getting our teams involved in community activities as much as possible is extremely important, really, for two reasons. One is Birmingham and Alabama, the place we live, we're a community place. And people go out, when you go to the grocery store, you see people that when you're driving down the street, you might wave at friends. And I love that about our state. And I think that, when people move here from far away, they might be used to a bigger city where people are very transient and you don't have that community feel. And to get people more involved in a community, whether it's a volunteer activity or to sit on a board or a committee on something that they have a passion about, I believe that's something that I could have done right out of the box in Huntsville that I didn't do, that I could have done. Now, after a few years, we moved our headquarters to Birmingham after we really kind of got that AL.com business up and going. And that was a real positive move for me personally and for the business. I knew more people in Birmingham, and Birmingham had more community activities to offer at the time. Now, no slight to Huntsville. Huntsville's changing, and Huntsville is going to catch up possibly to Birmingham before long. But at the time, Birmingham just had a lot more to offer, and I became immediately engaged in the community. I joined the Downtown Rotary. I joined civic clubs. I'm involved in the river organizations because environment and outdoors is a passion of mine. So that's something that, looking back, I would have invested more time with each person, helping them identify a personal opportunity for those individuals to get involved in the community. And I would have done it faster myself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit similar. You're from here. My wife is from this area. And when I relocated our business to Birmingham from Florida, didn't know one person other than my wife's family. And so it in our business at the time, we were just cleaning homes around the state of Alabama. That's a pretty personal type of service. So it's important to have trust and to not have any connections here. It was tough. And so the same thing, I went out and shook hands and kissed babies and tried to meet as many people as I could possibly do, and still operate the business. And, there's only so much time in a day, but it definitely paid off in the end. And there's a lot of those connections that I met many years ago that still are very loyal to me and the brand today. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. So here's the cool part. For 16 years, you built this thing from the ground up. AL.com becomes this real thing, like I said, a living organism. People use it today like it's sort of the back of the hand. It's just what they do when they first wake up in the morning, even, I bet. And then you left that several years ago to start your own media organization called Bham Now. So what was the motivation there to try something different? And then just tell us a little bit more about it. This super creative logo, by the way, in the background. So I love that. So tell everyone about what Bham Now is and how you evolved from AL.com to that.
Sure. So, I'm always kind of looking for what's going to be next on the horizon, especially for digital media. It's my passion. And, as you can tell, it's what I've done for just about my entire life. And with the newspapers, we went through, as you would guess, a downsizing, and it's heavy, it's hard, and I honestly want to build good jobs in Alabama and in Birmingham, and I'm tend to be a little stubborn, and I believe that there are models that work for digital media and for media in general. So I started kind of looking outward and doing a little research on what was happening in other pockets of the country that appeared to be growing for media. And I found a couple. There was one called the Charlotte Agenda, which has recently been bought by another company, and Billy Penn, which is in Pennsylvania. And I kind of, unpacked some of their business model, and I talked to their owners, and I was at the same time, and you probably remember this, Ron, Birmingham started going through this renaissance. And this was in, 2016-ish, 2015. Downtown was becoming cool again. Avondale literally popped up out of the dust with Avondale Brewery and with the shops and the restaurants. We were getting local pubs opening in Birmingham. And, it's almost like the millennial generation was taking over, and all these great things were happening. And with my knowledge in media, I know that in big media and in companies that are owned by other companies, they've got really hard bottom lines, and they've got to protect that legacy model. And I wanted the freedom to build from scratch. Like, I asked myself, if I could build a digital company to serve the audience today, what would it look like? And what would it involve? And what would it entail? And that was the birth of Bham Now. And we're celebrating 5 years this summer. It's really built primarily for the youth-oriented, although they let me in sometimes to swim around in our content. But it's primarily made for millennial interest, people 24 to 45. And we've designed it in a way to appeal to that audience, that demographic. What do I mean by that? I mean, we take our content and we really work it and put it where people are and where people want that particular content. There's a lot that goes into it. It's an expensive business model. And, that's one of the reasons people kind of stay away from media. It's expensive. And so, the business model has to be solid. But it's been 5 years, and we've got, we're up to 30 people now. About 20 are in Birmingham, and we're expanding. So,
all right.
Yeah. So I'll get to that in a minute.
All right. So we're going to talk about that. I got to ask some questions here. So you've had 5 years of this, yet another startup, all in the digital space, digital media space. You're living this life, and almost, so many changes, had to have occurred in terms of industry and just likes and dislikes of, the people using the product. Yet you're navigating all those waters, and just growing with the industry. So what, with this new venture with Bham Now, what's one thing you can take away from it that if you had not have went through all the other years of growth personally and professionally, what's something that you would have really made a huge mistake on if you hadn't lived through that? So I guess the point is, so many people want to start a business now, let's start the business tomorrow, go on Shark Tank and do it. And I think sometimes people forget that there's some people hate hearing this, especially millennials. But there's definitely some sweat that has to occur, and some blood and tears even, before you get to that opportunity. And then you can use that experience, that even pain, to really take it and run. Was there any pain in your past that helped you to avoid pain in Bham Now today? I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a really big question. And I focus on there's a passion of what we're doing and why we're doing it that drives me through the tough spots. And I think that, when you're building a new company, discipline is mandatory. And I think, asking yourself that why and why am I doing this? And some people might want to start a business so they can say they have their own business. Some people might start a business because they want a lot of free time. Some people might start a business because they want to get really rich, or they want to build it and flip it. So I think, early on, and answering those questions is critical. And to the best of your ability, why am I doing this? And I knew very clearly why I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this because, number one, I deeply care about Birmingham and also Alabama. Number two, I am bullish and believe that there are models that work in digital media, and creating jobs is definitely part of that. And just that continual learning of focusing on what's next, and the energy that I personally get from that, and the challenge, those things really drive me forward. So definitely there's pain in the past, whether it's having to downsize an organization, or filing to go public and that not happening, or having some disagreement with a boss or an employee. Those are always really, really hard. And I think having that experience prepares you so that you're not surprised when problems come up. I find that in any situation with humans, you're going to have some disagreements. So leaning back on your teachings of how do you deal with that? When you've got an employee who says, hey, this is just not working for me, I am not happy, what do you do? So leaning back on that experience and working through situations as logically as you can, and keeping in mind what is best for the business and what's best for the people. Those are tough balances. Sometimes they can't be resolved. Sometimes they can be. And I think, all those years of experience have helped equip me to deal with those situations.
I love it. That's a great way to think. So there's somebody out there listening that has started a business, or is just, praying for this opportunity to start their own business, and they got this big idea. You're interesting and very unique, I think, in that for a long time you were very much, corporate America. You're C-level, top of the chain there, and then later on you became an entrepreneur. Was there any trepidation of was there any worry along the way that, I don't know if I should start a business or not, maybe I should just keep doing this thing? And even if there wasn't, once you became an entrepreneur, what kind of emotions did you feel, and how can you relate to somebody else that's out there thinking, I've got an idea, but I'm not sure if I should do it or not?
You've got some tough questions.
Well, what's so great about it, and I'll give some color to it, is I think everybody, like you said, there's so many different reasons to start a business, and they're all great, but there's a ton of fear. There's always this fear. Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to have enough support? Am I going to be smart enough to do it? Am I going to lose everything? All these fears that are there. And usually there's at least one big fear that pushes you away. So how do you know when it's okay to just say, I'm closing my eyes to these fears and I'm going in?
Right. So And I'm sure people think differently about it at their different stages of their life. And you're right. So, Bham Now was founded by someone over 50. And I could have taken another corporate job somewhere, and maybe I would have had to move to have found that and taken that. I didn't want to move. My dad was elderly, and I wanted to be here. And also, I just love Birmingham. Birmingham has so much to offer. So, how do you deal with those questions in your mind if you have an idea? I think it's really important on day one to answer the question, how will we make money? And if you're really new at running a business, getting advice or having an advisor or a mentor to help work you through that. A lot of people want to do something that's fun, a craft or whatever, and they don't really think hard about the business model. And to me, that is just part of it. It's got to be spelled out. It's got to be very clear. And not only how you will make money, but what connections do you have to get access to sell your product. And Ron, there's a lot of as you've probably seen, there are a lot of organizations that will give grants. The EDPA is a client of ours, and they have startup competitions all through the state, which I think are fantastic. And there are a lot of grant opportunities. And I would say a however about that. If you build your business based on a grant check, say of $100,000 or even $1 million, you still must have a very solid business plan and know where money is going to come from. If you're leaning on that grant to get you through, you're going to be a fizzle in the pan.
Right.
So getting advice on what is it you're selling, what need are you fulfilling, what pain are you helping to solve, and clearly mapping out how will we get in front of those clients and how will we pitch our product. To me, those are all just really important. So if you've got that fear, bounce that idea off of an experienced business person and bounce business models off, test that idea before you jump in. So that would be my answer.
All right. So I'm going to slow down with the tough questions and ask you the most fun question you're waiting for. What does Bham look like 5 years from now?
So Bham Now, there are two constituents that we listen to very carefully. One is our audience, and Bham Now is a multi-channel digital media company. What do I mean by that? We publish to our website, bhamnow.com. We also have 200,000 social followers on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, newsletters. So we've got many prongs to it. It's very important that we listen to our audience on all of those veins and we respond to them with what they're really looking for. The great thing about building a business, Ron, is if you're attuned to your constituents, whether there is an audience or whether it's a client, and you evolve to meet their needs better and better, to me, that is a formula for success. So we also listen to our clients. We serve approximately 60 local clients every month through Bham Now. Several of our clients said, we love Bham Now. We love what you're doing. We love the fun, the vibrancy, the original content that you make, but we need more of it because our business is expanding, whether it's, I won't name them off, but we have businesses that have arms all through the state. And in listening to that, we decided to launch a new brand called the Bama Buzz. So the Bama Buzz is only a couple of months old, but it's off to a very strong start. We already have 10 sponsors for the Bama Buzz, and the growth has already started very aggressively through search engine optimization and also through all of our digital channels. So I expect that we will continue to evolve. We're going to continue to, with social media, as you probably know, it's never one and done. You can't say we're there, hang our hat up, You have to
Right.
constantly look at what is next. So I don't want to divulge all of our plans, but we're definitely looking at what is next for digital media, and we're definitely building on that. So we are not at all comfortable with where we are. We are going to continue to erode even our traditional businesses and evolve those with new digital offers.
Well, you won't do this, but I'll do it for you. You should pat yourself on the back because you've had an amazing career. And no matter what happens from this point on, you've got a trophy case of success that you can be proud of. And so congratulations on all of that. I know you're going to keep doing it. So Bham Now and Bham Buzz, you're going to crush it there too. And like you said, most importantly, beyond all the great content that will be created there, you're going to create opportunities, and that's what's so great about entrepreneurship is it generates wealth, but it also creates opportunities, which goes on to allow other people to go, find their dream as well and their purpose in life. So congratulations on all the things that you've done. I can't wait to see you keep growing. And thanks for your time today on our show.
Definitely, Ron. And thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
You bet. So before we go, I want to give you one last chance just to shout out to everyone that, anyone that wants to connect with you, interact with you, feel free to share any of those connection resources.
Yeah, so I can be reached very easily, Cindy, CINDY, at bhamnow.com. And of course, we have marketing offers for all levels of businesses, whether you're a small mom and pop shop or you're the biggest company in Alabama. We work with all of them. So email us, connect with us, follow us on all the different channels, and we look forward to connecting with you.
All right. Well, Cindy, thank you again. And we will see you around the Birmingham Entrepreneur.
Definitely. Thank you, Ron, and best of luck to you too.